The first time I watched a grown man in a costume put a wheel boot on a delivery van, I did the thing my wife has been mocking for 26 years. I said the license plate, the time, and the location out loud. To nobody, for the record. Lupe calls it my audio book of nothing. 26 years as a Clark County deputy will do that to a man. You narrate the world into a recorder because someday a defense attorney is going to ask you what you saw. And, I think it was around evening, is how guilty men walk. So I stood in my own driveway in Coyote Ridge, a gated nothing of a subdivision northwest of Las Vegas, and I narrated a man named Wayne Pruitt into what would eventually become a very good file. He didn't know that yet, neither did I, honestly. I just knew the boot was wrong, the badge was wrong, and the amber light on his truck was the wrongest thing of all. Let me tell you about that amber light, because it matters later, and I want you to see it the way I saw it. There are 3 colors that mean something on a vehicle in this country. Red and blue mean authority, a sworn officer, the power to stop you, detain you, arrest you. Amber means one thing and one thing only. Look at me. It's the color of tow trucks and road crews, and the guy sweeping the Walmart lot at 4 in the morning. It carries exactly 0 legal power. So when Pruitt rolled through our gate with an amber bar spinning on his black pickup, wearing a uniform the color of a real one, with a badge that said officer in letters just blurry enough to survive a glance, my professional read was immediate and simple. Everything about this man was designed to be misread. That is not a hobby. That is a business model. The badge said Vanguard Community Patrol. The man said Captain. Coyote Ridge said, God help us, thank you. Our board had voted him in 3 weeks earlier at a meeting I skipped, because I have found that homeowners association meetings are where reasonable people go to become unreasonable, and I was enjoying my retirement. Brenda Colfax, our board president, had sold the neighborhood on Vanguard the way you sell anything to frightened people, with a story about crime that had never happened and a solution that cost them nothing, at first. I met her at the mailboxes the morning after the boot, and she was luminous with civic pride. Isn't it wonderful, she said, having real security? I said it was certainly something. She patted my arm and told me that all the patrol arrangements went through her nephew's firm now, so I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I filed that sentence away. A president who routes the neighborhood's money through her nephew and calls it a favor is a president worth watching, and I have always had time to watch. The boot on the delivery van cost the driver $150, cash only, no receipt. I know because I asked him, quietly, while Pruitt was busy being important at the gatehouse. The kid was maybe 22, sweating, holding a stack of packages he was now hours late delivering, and he'd paid it out of his own pocket rather than lose his route. They said I parked in a fire lane, he told me. It was not a fire lane. It was the visitor curb, unpainted, where delivery vans had parked since the day the concrete cured. I told him to keep the number in his phone and drive safe. Then I went home and did what I do, which is nothing that looks like anything. I opened a folder on my laptop, named it something boring, and started keeping the world. The show up close came a week later, and it was worse than I expected, which is saying something because I had expected quite a lot. I was walking the dog when Vanguard detained a courier at the gate, a woman this time, in a hurry, who had made the mistake of stopping her car to read the call box. Pruitt and a younger guard boxed her car with their truck. Pruitt approached her window with his hand resting on his belt in the exact spot where a real officer's hand goes, the spot your body learns and never forgets, and he said the words, "Ma'am, you're being detained. I need to see your license. We're going to run your plate." He had a radio on his shoulder and he keyed it and set a code into it, a real one, a clean 10 code, the kind you don't get from watching television. My whole body went cold and quiet the way it used to on a call that was about to go bad, because a man playing dress-up fumbles the codes. A man who says them like a reflex learned them behind a real badge. I did not raise my voice. I have found that the calmest man in any confrontation is usually the one holding the outcome. I walked over, phone already recording, and I asked Pruitt one question, pleasantly, the way you'd ask a stranger for the time. "What agency are you with, Captain?" He looked at me, and there was a flicker, the flicker of a man deciding which lie to use, and he said, "Vanguard's contracted for security enforcement in this community. Sir, please step back." Contracted, security, enforcement. 3 words doing the work of a word he wasn't allowed to say. Behind him, the younger guard, a kid named Tyler, I'd learn, with a face not yet fully committed to the con, leaned toward the courier and murmured, "Sorry about this." Just that, "Sorry about this." It was the only honest sentence anyone in that uniform said all week, and I marked it, because in my experience, the crack in the wall is always a person, and that person had just introduced himself. So I went to work like it was 1998, and I still had a caseload. First up was the Nevada Private Investigators Licensing Board, the state body that licenses every security guard and patrol company that operates in Nevada. Because in this state, you cannot legally put a man in a uniform and set him loose on the public without a license, a background check, and a registration for every single guard. I ran Vanguard Community Patrol. Nothing. Not a lapsed license, not a pending application, nothing. A blank where a legally operating company is required to exist. Which meant every boot, every detention, every dollar of that cash was being collected by a company that had no legal right to wear the costume at all. That alone was a crime before we ever got to the fun part. Then I did the part that takes shoe leather. I knocked on doors. I found 9 neighbors who'd paid Vanguard, and the pattern was a photocopy every time. A boot or a threat, a demand for $150, cash only, no receipt, and a word: obstruction, trespassing, detained. Chosen to make a frightened person reach for their wallet. Nobody had gotten paper. Nobody had gotten a receipt, which meant the money wasn't landing in any account a homeowners association could audit, which meant it was landing somewhere else. So I pulled the state business filings on Vanguard Community Patrol LLC, and there, on a form any citizen can read for free, was the sole managing member, Dylan Colfax, Brenda's nephew. The president had hired her own nephew's unlicensed company to shake down her own neighbors for untraceable cash, and she'd told me so herself at the mailboxes, smiling, because in her mind it was a favor and not a felony. People confess the most when they don't know they're confessing. I had a paper case. What I did not have, yet, was the thing that turns a paper case into a conviction. And that thing walked up my driveway on a Tuesday night with his hat in his hands. Tyler, 24 years old, and scared in the specific way of a young man who has realized, too late, exactly what he agreed to. He'd figured out who I was. Retired law enforcement has a smell, apparently. And he sat at my kitchen table and told Lupe her coffee was the best he'd ever had, which was a lie. And then he showed me his phone. On it were the post orders Pruitt sent the guards, written instructions. And they were not the fumbling of a confused man. They were a script. Imply your police. Use the phrase lawful detention. Tell them you're running their plate. Collect the fee in cash and log nothing. Split the take Friday. It was, in writing, in his own words, a manual for pretending to be the government. I have testified in a lot of cases. I have rarely held a piece of evidence that did the prosecutor's whole job for him. But Tyler gave me something better than the script. He gave me Pruitt. "The captain used to be a real cop," he said. "He talks about it, says they screwed him." I made one phone call to a friend who still had access to the things I no longer did, and the answer came back the next morning, and it explained everything. Wayne Pruitt had been a sworn officer in another county years ago. He had been decertified, stripped of his post-certification, the credential that makes a badge mean anything, after an illegal search went to a lawsuit and the lawsuit went bad. The state had taken his authority away and put his name in a registry so that no agency would ever hand him a real badge again. And so he'd bought himself a fake one. That was the whole ugly engine of the man. He wasn't a confused civilian playing pretend. He was a former officer who knew, to the letter, exactly which powers he no longer had, and had built a business out of using them anyway. There is no confusion defense available to the one man in the county who knows better than anyone what the line is, because he used to stand on the legal side of it. I could have walked the file into the district attorney right then. I didn't, and here's why. A paper case against a man who's going to claim he sincerely believed he had authority is a coin flip, and I don't flip coins with felonies. I wanted him committing the crime, clean, on camera, in front of witnesses whose badges were real. I wanted a jury to watch him do it. I was still deciding how to arrange that when Pruitt made the decision for me, because men like Wayne Pruitt always, eventually, pick the wrong person. Her name was Dana. She was a nurse at a hospital across the valley, and she came home at 2:15 in the morning after a 14-hour shift. And she paused her car at the gate the way 10,000 tired people have paused at 10,000 gates. Pruitt boxed her in. He demanded $150 for obstructing the entrance. She told him she lived there, she was exhausted, and she wanted to go to bed. He told her she was being detained, and when she, a grown woman who pays a mortgage 40 feet from where this man was standing, tried to simply drive to her own house, he reached through her open window and grabbed her arm to stop her. That is battery. The detention was false imprisonment, and it happened at 2 in the morning with no one watching and no camera running. So it was also, legally, almost nothing. Her word against a man in a uniform, which is exactly the arithmetic these people count on. She told me about it the next day at the mailboxes, shaking, and I felt the specific old anger that used to mean I was about to be very, very patient. He'd crossed a line no jury would forgive. I just had to make him do it again where the cameras could see. So I built it. Not a trap exactly. I want to be precise, because I've had defense attorneys make hay of that word. I created an ordinary situation and let a criminal choose to commit a crime in it. I called a man I trust, Sergeant Ruben Ortega of the Clark County Sheriff's Office, and I gave him the file. The empty PILB record, the post-order script, the LLC filing with a nephew's name on it, the decertification. I gave him Dana's account and the 9 neighbors. Ortega read it in about the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee, and then he said the sweetest words in the English language. "Where do you want my unit?" We staged it for a Thursday evening, the pickup night, when Pruitt would be at the gate with his amber light spinning and his fee book open. Tyler made sure the neighborhood's own gate camera, the one Brenda had installed to spy on residents coming and going, the one aimed straight at the call box, was recording, and that we'd have the footage. A neighbor's doorbell camera covered the street. My dash cam covered the rest, and I sat in my truck at the curb and narrated the plate, the time, and the location out loud, to nobody, for the record, one last time. The bait was simple, because the crime was a script, and a script can be prompted. A car pulled to the gate and stopped a beat too long at the call box. A suspicious visitor, exactly the kind of nothing Pruitt lived to inflate. He was out of his truck before it fully stopped, and I watched 26 years of my career and 3 weeks of my patience collapse into 90 perfect seconds. The amber light turned lazy circles over the whole thing. He approached the window with his hand on his belt in that trained, terrible spot. He keyed his radio and said his 10 code to no one. And then he said all of it, every word from his own script, loud enough for 3 cameras and 1 very interested former deputy. "Step out of the vehicle. You're being detained. This is a lawful stop. I'm running your plate. It's $150 for the violation, cash, or we boot it and tow it." He reached for the boot at his feet. And that is the moment 2 unmarked units rolled up behind him. Quiet, no lights, and 4 real deputies got out. Here is the part I will enjoy for the rest of my life. Pruitt, hearing vehicles behind him, did not run and did not fold. He did the thing his whole ruined career had trained into his bones. He turned toward the arriving officers, drew himself up, and took command. "Officers," he barked, "I've got this scene under control." And he reached up and tapped the badge on his own chest, the fake one. Officer in letters just blurry enough. Flashing it at 4 sworn Clark County deputies the way you'd flash a real one, presenting his costume as credentials to the actual government. There was a silence I would pay money to have bottled. Then Sergeant Ortega tilted his head, looked at the badge, looked at the man, and said, "Captain of what, exactly?" Pruitt didn't have a script for that. They took the fake badge off his chest and put real handcuffs on his wrists. And through all of it, spinning its slow, honest, powerless circles over a man being arrested for pretending to be the law, the amber light kept doing the one thing it was ever legally permitted to do. It said, to everyone now watching, "Look at me." The gate camera Brenda installed to watch her neighbors caught the whole collapse of her scheme from a second angle, in high definition, which I consider the tidiest irony of my professional life. The charges filled a page. Impersonating a peace officer under Nevada law, the felony that Pruitt, of all men on earth, could not claim to have committed by accident. Extortion for the cash. Theft and unlawful vehicle immobilization for the boots. False imprisonment and battery for Dana at 2 in the morning. Operating an unlicensed security company, which turned out to be the least of his troubles, a parking ticket in a hurricane. The former officer who'd bought a badge because the state took his real one went to jail wearing neither. Brenda Colfax was charged too, because the post-order script and the cash flow and the LLC with her nephew's name led straight to her door, and her fingerprints, the paper kind, which are the only kind that ever really convict anyone, were on all of it. Self-dealing, breach of fiduciary duty, her share of the extortion. Her nephew's company was dissolved. The board was ordered to make restitution. Every untraceable $150 traced at last, and it turns out the fastest way to unite a neighborhood is to show all of them at once that they were robbed by the same 3 people. The whole board resigned inside a month. Our insurer dropped the association's policy, and the new one cost a fortune, which is the closest thing to karma the insurance industry offers. Tyler testified. He got immunity, and something better than immunity, a second chance he actually seemed to want. Last I heard, he'd started the real academy, the one with the background check and the standards and the badge you have to earn, and I wrote him a letter of reference that told the plain truth, which was that when a young man had one honest sentence in him at the worst possible moment, he'd said it, and then he'd said the rest of them under oath. Dana got her restitution and a formal apology, and, I suspect, the best sleep of her year. Lupe made a point, at dinner, of noting that my audiobook of nothing, 26 years of narrating license plates to an empty truck, had personally put a fake cop in a real cell, and that she would be requiring an apology for every time she'd mocked it, which I have declined to give on the grounds that a man must retain some leverage in a marriage. They let me keep the amber light. Ortega signed it out of evidence when the case closed and dropped it on my porch with a note that said, "Trophy." So I bolted it to the top of the post by the clubhouse, where the gate camera used to hang, and on the night the new board voted to disband Vanguard forever, I flipped it on. It spun its slow amber circles over an empty lot, powerless, meaning exactly what it had meant from the first morning I saw it, and exactly what it will always mean, no matter who's wearing the costume underneath it. Look at me. This time everybody did, and then everybody went home, which is the only thing a gate is really for. Okay, author here. Let's talk about how Wayne Pruitt handed us his own conviction. His fatal mistake wasn't the boots or the cash. It was that he wrote it down. The post-order script turned, "I sincerely believed I had authority," into, "I instructed my employees to imply we were police." And a decertified officer is the one Chileviec who can't plead confusion, because he used to hold the real badge. Brenda's mistake was smaller and dumber. She bragged. "It all goes through my nephew's firm," felt like power at the mailbox, and read like a confession in a filing. And that amber light, and he chose a costume designed to be misread, which is great until 4 real deputies read it correctly. Practical takeaways, quickly. Amber lights are not authority, red and blue are, and only on sworn officers. A real security guard in most states is licensed and registered. You can look that up in about 4 minutes, for free. Cash only, no receipt, is not a payment method, it's a confession. And if someone in a uniform grabs you, that uniform doesn't make it legal. That's a call to 911, not $150. Now my question for you. If a patrol like that boxed in your car tomorrow night, would you pay the $150 and drive away? Or would you be the one who starts the file? Be honest in the comments. I already know some of you are Gabe.